Good morning and welcome to the weekly review live on Teachers Talk Radio. With me today to review the week in education, we have John Gibbs, we have Brent Poland, and we've got Dr. Sean Lang, Chair of Governors at Queen Emma School, who has been on the show, I believe, on the 30th of April, about 6 weeks ago now, and is joining us again because the first story we have concerns Queen Emma School and Ofsted, because Ofsted has admitted that its inspection of Queen Emma Primary School in Cambridge was unreliable, and as a result they have pulled the inadequate judgment from their website. According to the school's head teacher Sarah Jarman, Ofsted's response concluded that they hold concerns about the security of the personal development judgment, and for this reason the report cannot be sustained. The school was quoted as requires improvement on the personal development metric and inadequate on leadership and management. Dr. Sean Lang, the Chair of Governors, who joins us today, previously stated that the personal development judgment was based on the assertion that not all children had access to extracurricular activities on grounds of cost, when Dr. Lang stated the opposite, that the school guarantees to pay for any child who cannot afford a club or activity. The overall inadequate judgment would have meant that Queen Emma would have been forced to leave the Queen's Federation and become an academy under new management. Queen Emma will face a further inspection as soon as possible. Ms. Jarman and Dr. Lang, who joins us today, praised and thanked parents for their resounding backing and are seeking to claim back from Ofsted money already spent on legal fees. Ofsted had previously said it firmly stood by its inspection. So, Sean, thank you very much for joining us today. What were your thoughts when this happened and Ofsted admitted that it was going to overturn its judgment?
I was surprised, obviously relieved, and I won't go into all the details of the reasoning because there are issues involved in that. But basically, if they've withdrawn the judgment and are going to reinspect, that's what we asked for right at the beginning. So, in a sense, there's nothing to be gained from going further into the details of the judgment because you couldn't gain any more than the fact we've already gained. But I was surprised. I understand from Schools Week, I think it was, that something like 718 complaints were made to Ofsted over the course of a year, of which 3 resulted in a change of grade. So the odds were absolutely stacked against us. So, you know, obviously we're relieved. We're not celebrating exactly because this isn't something to celebrate. It should, you know, the whole thing should never have happened. And but we have confidence in the quality of the school and of the teachers and of all that goes on within it. So we're facing, you know, the idea of reinspection with complete confidence. In a sense, what this has all been about has been about that if you have a professionally conducted inspection and you know how good your school is, then you have nothing to fear. But it's the first bit, of course, which was the pointed issue in our case, and I'm no doubt in others.
Yes, I know we discussed 6 weeks ago some of the issues that you had about the conduct of some of the inspectors, and I'm sure nothing has changed on that, and there's no point discussing it any further, I suppose. What do you think? What lessons do you think we can learn from this for Ofsted, for schools, for the government, and for anybody else?
There are crucial lessons to be learned, and they apply to all schools. I mean, that's really what this Queen Emma case has been about. We were very much campaigning, obviously, for ourselves and for our pupils and our teachers, but also for all schools. So first of all, there's the issue I've just mentioned, that if all inspections were conducted professionally, there'd be much less to complain about. Now, what's in all the revelations that have come out, both in relation to our case and particularly, of course, in relation to what happened at Caversham, we thought that what we'd got was something unusual. And I'm hearing from lots of other schools saying that our inspectors too behave very, very, unprofessionally. So that's a basic. But more important even than that would be if Ofsted was as accountable as schools are. I can't see any reason why the principle of accountability shouldn't apply to Ofsted every bit as much as it does to schools. And just imagine if there were an independent body to which schools could appeal if they had concerns about an Ofsted inspection, other than simply going through Ofsted itself, then immediately that knowledge would have an impact upon the way an inspection is conducted. And linked with that is the issue of freedom of information for the evidence base. And this, incidentally, is something where we are still fighting very much on behalf of all schools, because there is a general issue here. We are saying that once an inspection is over, and there's a difference in law interpretation here, because Ofsted says an inspection sort of continues. But no, the 2005 Education Act makes it perfectly clear that inspection ends with the production of the report. And what we're arguing is that at that stage, the evidence base should be made public, not just us, but for all schools. But actually, I would go further and say that if the inspectors shared the evidence base of their inspection with the head teacher at the end of the inspection and said, look, this is what we've got, then if there were mistakes, misunderstandings, misinterpretations, or any other form of inaccuracy, they could be identified, they could be resolved before the end of the inspection, and so many of these problems would have been would be avoided, and you wouldn't have some 718 complaints against Ofsted in the course of 1 year, because it seems to me that is not a record to be proud of.
No, I think you've made a really key point there about the purpose of inspection and the inspectorate, and that inspection should be something which is done with schools rather than to them, and that the joined-up coordinated approach is really, really important in ensuring that the outcome of that inspection is one that is as solidly rooted in firm evidence as can possibly be, especially given the short nature of these inspections. They're only 2 days. For example, the teacher training provider that I help mentor with is getting an Ofsted inspection next week, but it's a 4-day inspection. Now, how can it be possible that a teacher training provider has a 4-day inspection when there's 3 inspectors and about 100 trainees involved, whereas a school in our case with 1,500 children only has a 2-day inspection? So I think you've raised some very valuable points there. We know that Julian Keegan is going to say some things on Monday about the future of inspection. I'm not sure what you know, Sean. I know that some people who've been involved in fighting cases on judicial review against Ofsted in other cases may already know. Julia Waters, of course, spoke to Julian Keegan earlier last week. John, your thoughts on this situation? Ofsted has overturned the unreliable, inadequate judgment of Queen Emma. Is this going to be the start of a process, or is this going to be an exception to the rule?
Well, you hope it's start of something, a process, and congratulations to Queen Emma there. I mean, that obviously that's an inspirational story for all schools and a lesson to be learned. If the number of complaints against Ofsted and the number of successful appeals are so mismatched, well, what the explanation for that can't be that teachers are making lots of groundless complaints. They're professionals. Yeah. So even if you weed out the aggrieved schools and the people who feel a little bit annoyed about what's happened, there's clearly something very wrong with the system where there's such a disconnection between the number of complaints and the number of successful appeals. But the whole basis, I think, it's almost like we're waking up from something and realizing that snapshot inspections of schools, the short turn up, see it all in a microcosm, you can see the whole thing, is just completely wrong. And most other countries in the world have cooperative, some kind of process way of inspecting schools. Not that schools don't need inspections, all schools need to be reflective and self-reflective and cooperative with other schools and so on. But this system, it's punitive, and its structure arrives with the possibility, sort of built in, that they're trying to catch you out. If you're going to inspect people in 2 days without warning, it's because there's a suspicion that you're up to something. So it's philosophically wrong. Hopefully, we're beginning to realise that.
I think Sean also raised a very important point about the professionalism of the inspectorate, and actually the judgment a school receives can depend very much on the individuals who walk into the school. I know, and I'm sure that John, Brent, and Sean yourself will know that when you've been involved in inspections in the past, the inspectors that some schools have received have been really open and and thankful for allowing them to come into your school. But we know that's not always the case. So, Sean, Julian Keegan's going to make some recommendations on Monday, some of which will come into play immediately. What would you hope to see generally in the school's picture that Julian Keegan's going to say?
I think, first of all, that I don't even have to hope for, this is clearly happening, that a sense that someone up there is listening. And I was very pleasantly surprised to learn that there is this openness, because I think one of the hardest feelings that you get when you're fighting a case like this is that you're up at, it's David and Goliath. You're up against this huge, great body called Ofsted, which doesn't listen, and which is very, very difficult to find, and of course very expensive to find a way to fight. So that's the first thing, that there's a willingness to listen. Second, I would like to hear that they're prepared to listen, to carry on listening, to have some sort of consultative process, a meaningful consultative process with schools who have got something to say to Gillian Keegan, so that she can get some of the thoughts. Very specifically, though I doubt if we'll get all of this, there has to be some sense of care for head teachers and indeed for teachers as a whole, that sort of support, somewhere, some concern for the impact of an inspection upon the well-being of teachers. One of the hardest things about this whole story is that it took a tragedy to really make it come to a head, and it should never have done that. Then, as I was saying earlier, I think some element of accountability for Ofsted needs to be built in. It needs to be independent of Ofsted, in the same way that every other profession has got some sort of appeals process to which people can turn. But above all, I would say that you need to empower schools. Amanda Spielman has said that she wants a dialogue, inspection to be a dialogue between inspectors and schools. And I would entirely support that. I'm sure every school would support it, but that's not what we're seeing. We're not seeing a dialogue. Well, no, I'll correct that slightly. Some schools do. And I must stress that when I see on Twitter a school, which is delighted because it's got a good Ofsted rating, I'm not sort of feeling bitter. I'm delighted for them. But I'd like to see that sense of, dialogue, of partnership much more commonly.
Thank you, Sean. And if I can go finally to Brent. Now, as Teachers Talk Radio's honourable member for the NEU, I'm sure that what you'd like to see happen to Ofsted goes a little bit further than what Sean has proposed. But do you think that what Sean has set out as reforms for Ofsted, which could be made immediately, would be a useful first step in your view?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thanks, Sean. I've been a governor myself of a school on 2 occasions. I know how difficult it is to be a governor. It's a voluntary job. It's becoming more of a part-time job than anything else. And I know you've probably lived this, and I don't think sometimes the chairs of governors don't always get the credit, because you're sometimes taking the hits that the teachers aren't taking as well. As I know that takes a lot of broad shoulders to be a chair of governor. So thank you for holding the line on this. And that's the thing about, having local people fighting for the local school and standing up for their local school. And I think that's testament to your community, because they're not just having to go with the school, it's the immediate community as well. A community you're vested in, a community you care about, and that comes across. And that's what we need, people to stand up for education. So that's what my union is about, standing up for education, for what we believe in, what we think is right. I like your idea of an independent. I think it's time for a school ombudsman, the same way as you'd have a police ombudsman, somebody impartial, somebody depoliticized, somebody completely independent, and somebody can take the slack off of schools and take the temperature down. Somebody that can mediate between the different situations, completely neutral. And I like that idea as well. I think your staff, I do worry when you say, being re-inspected again. That's tough. That's tough at the end of a term, and a difficult term. But the fact that you're saying, they want this because they've got none to hide, I think that's testament in itself. If your staff are motivated to say, we'll come together, and I'm sure that the solidarity is strong in your staff room, as it would be, because people do come together during Ofsted, don't they? You get the best out of it. It's in the trenches, isn't it? It's that kind of mentality in the trenches. But it's tough to do that once, but to do it twice is, fair play. So I'm sure you'll be looking after each other. And thirdly, obviously, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, only 3 overturned. I think there's more out there. I think there's going to be more people out there that have 700 odd cases of Ofsted, because let's be honest with you, I think what you're alluding to earlier on was the Ofsted roulette. It's just Ofsted roulette. You just don't know what you're going to get. So I think that's not good enough. So yeah, absolutely agree. And good luck to your staff as well.
Much like in the case of exam grades, I know John Gibbs hosted a show on this once upon a time, where a number of exam grades are unreliable, particularly in subjects like history and English literature. A lot of it's exactly the same with Ofsted, and that 2 inspectors can have massively different views on things. I think, Mark, if we just round this up now, I think comparing Ofsted inspection to trench warfare as Brent has just done there, just shows to a lot of non-teachers, I think, just what the pressures of Ofsted bring, and hopefully thanks to people like Sean and to people like Flora Cooper, of course, and to Sarah Jarman, Queen Emma's head teacher, who have been, you know, fighting on behalf of teachers for a fairer inspection process. Then hopefully we're going to see some of those pressures removed nationally. So thank you, Sean, and congratulations on the overturned judgment. We wish Queen Emma the very best of luck with their next Ofsted inspection.
Thank you very much for having me back on.
Thank you for your time. Now, Pearson, edXL's new student-centred French, German and Spanish 2024 GCSEs cater to the needs of all learners, regardless of their background, ability or reason for studying. Rooted in learned language knowledge, their assessments are transparent, accessible, allowing all students to showcase their language skills through inclusive and relatable content. The new Pearson MFL GCSEs build a shared cultural capital that helps students develop an understanding of and appreciation for the wider world. So why not go and find out more at go.pearson.com/MFL. Then we're going to talk about behaviour. This is going to be very, very important because there's been 2 national behaviour surveys which have been released. And if we start, first of all, with the National Behaviour Survey from the government, which collected data from June 2022, I believe the hope is that this is going to be a longitudinal survey, so that we're going to visit the same teachers with the same schools over the same period of time. And one of the things that we've got here is the percentage of leaders, teachers and pupils who report that school had been calm and orderly every day or most days in the past week. And as we can see, well over 90% of leaders thought that their school had been calm and orderly, whereas it's only 70% of teachers and around 55% of pupils. So we have quite a significant gap here. And if you look at secondary schools, the differences are even more stark. And 46% of secondary leaders thought their school had been calm and orderly every day or most days, which tells you that more than half of secondary leaders did not think their school had been calm or orderly. When you look at secondary teachers, you're looking at just 23%. So more than 3 in 4 secondary teachers did not think their school had been calm and orderly every day or most days in that week. And when you look at secondary pupils, we go down to 16%, just 1 in 6 believe that their school had been calm and orderly every day or most days in the past week. Now, when we look at the key findings of the National Behaviour Survey, a lot of these things speak out quite, starkly. So 62% of school leaders and teachers had reported that misbehaviour interrupted teaching in at least some lessons in the week they were surveyed. And here's the one that stands out for me. Teachers reported that for every 30 minutes of lesson time, 6.3 minutes were lost due to misbehaviour. In 5 years at secondary school, that adds up to over a year of lost learning time. And 3 in 5 school leaders and teachers reported that pupil misbehaviour had had a negative impact on their health and well-being. Brent, you're a secondary school teacher. What are your thoughts on this? Does this chime with you, and what lessons can we learn nationally?
Yeah, anecdotally, I've had the situation where I bridge the gap between my colleagues who are, on the chalk face, and my leadership management as part of my union job. And an exercise was done recently, a post-it note exercise, which was what percentage of pupils of the school do you think are badly behaved? And my head teacher was mortified when some of the percentages were coming back, and his perception was, no, come on, that's not that percent. It can't be that percent. And I'm going, that's what your staff believe it is to be. What's interesting to take from that, I was aware there was a gap, but there's always a gap between leadership and management and the teachers in the chalk face. But to see the pupils, again, that's a huge consistent gap between what the student's perception is versus the teacher's perception, which is the secondary leaders' perception. And I suppose what I can explain with that would be the transition between lessons has become a huge problem. In and out of lessons become a huge problem. Toilets, vaping. There's a lot of trends that are happening up and around the school. Kids not able to sit for 5 minutes. Kids not able to concentrate. It's a bit of a COVID legacy as a technological legacy. We've talked before about this type of stuff, but definitely I would agree that that's accurate to what I'm seeing. In a school that used to be very, very well behaved, the last couple of years have been difficult. It's hard to say that it's completely COVID. I think it's society, COVID, technology. It's a whole host of things that are happening at the same time. Lack of SEND funding, class sizes increasing, non-specialist teachers, lack of teachers covering lessons. We're running out of supply teachers, obviously, which they don't have the same behavior management. So there's a whole host of things feeding into this, and behaviors definitely, for me, is a massive problem, because we said at the start about the going on strike. If you ask teachers would they go on strike at the moment, pay and conditions, if they were given a choice, I think behavior would be higher up that list. But we can't go on strike when it comes to behavior. But I think that is one of the key issues that are now really impacting on schools. And it's impacting in mental health and welfare, which is in turn driving more people out of the profession, which is in turn then exacerbating the whole situation. So I think they need to get a handle on this. Absolutely. I think that's accurate, yeah.
Now, John, the Children and Young People's Mental Health Coalition this week also published their report on behaviour and mental health in schools, and their finding, they took it, I suppose they're investigating the same topic but took a slightly different slant on this. In that 52% of young people said their school was not responsive to their needs when dealing with behavioural issues. 77% of parents and carers said that behaviour management techniques their child had experienced were not effective at all in improving behaviour. The report also stated that SEN and disabilities is a root cause of behaviour, and the survey was made up of 840 self-selected responses to online surveys, as reported by the authors of the report themselves. John, how can two separate reports and two separate organisations take different views on what's driving behaviour problems in schools?
I don't know that they are so wildly different in a way. They're just looking at it from a different perspective, in the sense that the first report, you quite rightly highlighted the kind of reality gap between management and teachers, and also a gap in understanding of what goes on in classrooms between students and teachers. If you ask a group of, say, people who are towards the end of their school career, like sixth formers, you say, what was your experience in the lower school? Did you perchance ever find that lessons were disrupted? You'll stand back as students, unload years of frustration and how they found it difficult to concentrate in this particular class or this particular teacher, and they'll have high expectations of what they think lessons should be, and the vast majority of them will want to have it differently. So there's a tension in schools, a tension between management and teachers, students and their everyday experience. So I'm not sure that I can see how school is deeply disturbing to the mental health and emotional stability of students. That some schools get it very badly wrong, though, I'm also convinced is true. I've seen the experience of exclusion rooms, and anyone who's supervised an exclusion room will know it's one of life's most dispiriting experiences. And the kind of schools where you have, first time every time, zero tolerance behaviour programs, which almost always are an idea that they've lost control, they've run out of ideas. Behaviour in schools is the great elephant in the room. It's the one that. It's not an easy solution, and that the problems are, as Brent points out, manifest and deeply embedded in society and deeply embedded in the structure of schools and so on. But there are ways of getting it badly wrong and harming students. And I think that second report does highlight that.
Thank you for that, John. Now, obviously, both reports are taking a view on behaviour that it's a significant problem. We've now got 40,000 teachers leaving the profession for reasons other than retirement this year, the highest for a number of time. We did invite Tom Bennett on. It's a shame he didn't come on because it's Sunday morning. He did offer to do a pre-recorded segment, but we want this live. One of the questions that I would have probably asked him is, he's been behaviour staff for 8 years now. Has anything improved? And is it, and what is his impact in his role? Brent, obviously, you're not Tom Bennett, and obviously we'd love Tom Bennett to be able to respond to that, and I may well ask him as well. But 8 years now, what's happened?
I think we have, what's frustratingly, we are better teachers than we've ever been. We understand exactly what John is saying. I think we understand now how to handle behaviour better. I mean, I find myself looking for more conversations with children, being a bit more flexible, and being more understanding of children's needs. We've done a lot of CPD on things like, some psychological disorders that, we understand children's drivers. We understand the behavior, understand their brain better. So we know what behavior management works better. The problem is that we are swamped. We are oversubscribed. We've got too many children, too many managed moves, Ofsted pressure. Head teachers can't really, do very much. There's not much wiggle room when it comes to behavior. So there's a frustrating thing of, we all know what we need and want to do, but we seem to have one hand tied behind our back when we try and do it. And that's the frustrating thing is. So I think there are some improvements in schools. It's not universal. Some children have thrived in schools, but that's the problem. Is it's a postcode lottery. Some schools are doing brilliantly. Some schools are not doing so brilliantly. Some schools have got behaviour management in a better place, and other schools don't. But that's the luck of the draw. You're back to postcode lottery when it comes to it. So some things have improved, but overall, on balance, the students' behaviour is reaching, I believe, epidemic proportions. The last caveat to that is, if I look at what's happening in America, if I look what happens in Australia or other countries, this is happening internationally. I think there is a definite situation that's happening globally when it comes to children's behaviour. It's a generational thing. It's a technological thing. It's a societal thing. And I think we are, just in the UK, just impacted more because of, I think, the way our school systems are run and the way that we need central control. You can't just laissez-faire. We need more help, is what I'm saying. We just need more help to do our jobs, which I think we can do better than we used to be able to do.
Of course, this week, a 14-year-old boy died in a West Lothian school in an incident involving two 14-year-old boys in St Kentigern's Academy in Blackburn, Scotland. And the head teacher said, everyone in our school community has been devastated to learn of the tragic death of one of our students. Our thoughts and prayers are with our family and friends, and we extend our deepest condolences and offers of support. And of course, our thoughts at Talk Radio are with the family of Hamda Aslam, and of course with the school community there in Blackburn as well, because nobody ever wants to hear something like this happen, and it would be absolutely devastating for their community. Now, this show is brought to you in partnership with the Happy Confident Company, who provide clinically approved, ready-to-go wellbeing and mental health programs to help your pupils thrive in only 10 minutes a day. Visit www.happyconfident.com to find out more. Let's move on to our final story of the day. I've just realised I was on mute for all of that. I believe I was.
I could hear you.
Oh, you could hear me. Fantastic. You said my microphone was, so you could hear me. I'm glad you could. So our final story of the day is that the Royal College of Paediatrics and Child Health has called for an outright ban on disposable vapes to reduce their popularity among young people. The RCPH says that a ban on single-use disposable vapes would reduce their environmental impact and discourage children who have never smoked from taking up vaping and risking long-term addiction and lung damage. The RCPH Vice President, Dr. Mike McKean, points out that it took decades to understand the relationship of cigarette smoking to cancer and respiratory illnesses. My worry is we could be sleepwalking into a similar situation here. Anybody who's ever taught Edexcel's GCSE history of the new spec will know that it was 1950 when doctors first made the connection between smoking and lung cancer. McKean added that there was a moral imperative to prevent companies from profiting from long-term addictions by targeting children with colourful packaging and fruity flavours. In 2021, 1 in 5 15-year-olds were reported to be vaping by NHS Digital, and figures are expected to be significantly higher this year. Michelle Mitchell, Chief Executive of Cancer Research, takes a different view to the RCPH, saying that the government should take urgent steps to reduce vapes from appealing to and being used by children, while ensuring that legal e-cigarettes can help people who want to quit smoking do so. The government's call for evidence on youth vaping closed on the 6th of June. If I can start with John on this one. Banning vaping, would this cause more problems than it would solve?
No. I think future generations are going to look at disposable vaping and say what they allowed that, and they called vape things bubblegum and cherry aid and such like, and clearly aimed at students. It's aimed at young people. It's one of those things where you just sort of we're clearly turning a blind eye to something which is blatantly obvious. Ban disposable vapes. Now, that smoking is extremely bad for you, and that's known. And that many doctors will say, well, if you're going to smoke a vape. And there's all sorts of ways you can have access to that in society without marketing it as a disposable consumer product, which is clearly, if not actually addictive, then psychologically addictive and quite likely to be dangerous to your health. So yeah, ban disposable vapes for all sorts of environmental reasons as well. Disposable vapes all over the place and get in the gutters and get in animals, no doubt, and probably killing seals somewhere. So I would get rid of, I would ban disposable vapes.
Thank you, John. Now, Brent, for Green, as the honourable member for the Green Party on Teachers Talk Radio, Greens have quite a relaxed policy on drugs and drug policy. Does vaping fall under the same thing here? Sort of keep it legal but regulate?
One of the good things about my political party is I'm not whipped and I'm an independent person. So they may have a relaxed attitude towards things, but I don't have a relaxed attitude towards it. I might be a little bit further on the authoritarian end of the Green Party. Look, at the end of the day, I think Australia's spot on with this. I think Australia have just gone for an outright ban and said, stuff this. I think the problem we've got is I tweeted up on one of my local MPs who happens to be a former health minister saying, look, get a handle on this, speak out against this. And before I knew it, I would consider to be the vaping lobby, who were like, oh, it was hilarious watching them defending vaping. And I just simply said, at the end of the day, you want to get children hooked on nicotine products, because that's what it is. It's nicotine. It's addictive. We're getting children addicted to a nicotine product at higher levels that they're vaping at the moment than what cigarettes would be. So you're kind of trading off one addiction for another addiction. Yeah, my father's currently got COPD, emphysema, because he smoked 50 cigarettes a day, and we told him all throughout his life to stop smoking. He wouldn't listen. So we knew there was a public health crisis brewing. We know how dangerous smoking is. We know, I think, 1 in 3 deaths in this country at one stage was linked to smoking. And we know how dangerous things like alcohol are. But if we knew that smoking and alcohol were dangerous when they were released, we would have taken steps and measures to make sure that the impacts, the secondary behaviors, could be lessened. And that's the thing about, addictive products to children, corroding their teeth, popcorn lung. We don't even know the long-term impacts. And we know the psychological impact as well, getting people addicted. We know it's not helping their concentration. We know it's their brain development. But to find nickel and poisonous chemicals in these vapes as well, I think there needs to be a public health campaign, and not one that comes from schools, because we'll do this. We always do. But we need this from the government themselves. Got to come top to bottom. Vaping is not a free hit. Marketed as it's kind of like not a bad thing. So parents are sometimes under the illusions of, well, it's okay that they vape. It's not the worst thing in the world. We need them now to be saying, actually, my child is sitting there in a toilet cubicle telling me at 15 years old they need their vape because they're stressed. It's not good. That's not good at all. So yeah, I would have them outright banned and brought all the way back to where they were 6 or 7 years ago, that they're only used for people who are quitting smoking. Quitting smoking, use a vape. Not quitting smoking, don't use a vape. Simple.
Thank you for that, Brent. And we've got Vic Lothian coming on in the future, I believe, the Green Party's education spokesperson. We're on a show, Chris Bouse coming on in the future. So I'm sure we'll be asking Vic some their views on that as well. Now, of course, before we leave today, we've got one big show for you tomorrow evening at 7:30 p.m. Nathan Ginn is taking the role of Tom Rogers, who is currently enjoying the warm weather in Berlin. And therefore, I've been doing the technology and doing the hosting on the weekly review today. Nathan Ginn is joined at 7:30 p.m. tomorrow by special guests from the Just Finance Foundation and Lifesavers, and they're going to be talking all about money and finance and financial education in primary schools, a really important topic, particularly in a cost of living crisis. Thank you very much, John and Brent, and of course to Sean, who joined us earlier. We'll be back next week with a weekly review. We promise we'll have some women then. But in the meantime, enjoy the show and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Enjoy the warm weather, and we will see you very soon. Bye-bye.